It's a Guy Jeans podcast.
Hi, you guys. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast, and I want to thank all of you guys listening and watching on YouTube as well. If you're not a subscriber on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, make sure to write a review. It helps the podcast grow, and much appreciated. My guest today is Mas Okui, and Mas is an interesting guy, not only in the fly fishing world, he's a legend in the fly fishing world, but he was also a prisoner in the 1940s at the Manzanar concentration camp up in the Eastern Sierra. His family lived in the San Fernando Valley, and then the U.S. government ordered all the Japanese Americans, thousands of them, to the concentration camp in California's Eastern Sierras. In fact, 62% of the inmates at Manzanar were U.S. citizens, and most of them were from the Los Angeles area. Pretty crazy, but I'm going to talk to Mas about his experience in the camp, and there's also some fishing stories that go along with that camp, and what it was like to be a kid there. Some of the people actually snuck out and went fishing up in the Eastern Sierra there. We're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about how he became a fisherman, how he became a fly fisherman, and his legendary leaders for fishing Hot Creek. And he's going to give that formula, as well as some of the flies that he used and ties for Hot Creek and some of the other streams and rivers that he fishes in the U.S. This is a good one, you guys. I'm honored to have Mas Okui on my podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Hi, Mas. How you doing?
I'm okay.
Well, great. I'm really honored to have you on my podcast. You know, I've heard of the legend himself for so many years. Being in the fly fishing world, and I'm happy to have you on my podcast and talk about fly fishing, of course. But I also wanted to talk about your history, being in Manzanar when you were a kid. I kind of read some history on you. I think you were probably about 10 or 11 years old when you went to Manzanar. And would you mind kind of talking about Manzanar and what that is, and for people that don't know?
Well, Manzanar was created during World War II to imprison people of Japanese descent because of the war against Japan, and that they were removed from the 3 West Coast states, Washington, Oregon, California, and the southern half of Arizona. Those became restricted zones, and they were placed in finally in what were called war relocation centers. Basically, they were prisons.
Yeah.
And the Japanese American National Museum chooses to use the term concentration camps.
Oh, okay.
But the problem with concentration camps is when I talk to Jewish people,
right,
is that those are not constant. I said, what happened to the Jews were slave labor death camps, but they don't use those terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were 10 or 11 years old when you went in?
Yeah, I was 10. We were living in Burbank at the time that we were told that we would have to leave.
I read somewhere your mom, when she told you, she said you're going to camp or something.
Yeah. Because I remember she was an avid knitter, so she knitted us some muffins and scarves and beanies. And I remember there was a shoe store chain called Carl's Shoes, which was significant back in the 30s and 40s. And she bought us some boots, which we had never had before. And we said, oh, yeah, we're going to camp.
That must have been something. You guys all did you guys all have to meet somewhere, and then they bust you up there?
What we did was, since we lived in Burbank, and there were only two federal facilities in Burbank, the post office and the Social Security office. So we had to gather at the Social Security office, which was about, maybe a block and a half, 2 blocks away from where we lived. And it was late April, and I remember we were told we could take with us only what we could carry.
Wow.
And so my mom laid out a sheet and put our stuff in it, and then with, I guess it was India ink, she put our family name and number on there, and tied it up in a bundle, and that's what we could carry.
Wow. So did they, one of the questions I've always wondered is, like, they cleared you guys out of your houses and homes, and when you guys were released from the camp, did you guys go back to those same homes?
Well, some people did, but what we did was the government provided a trailer camp in Burbank, adjacent to Lockheed.
Oh, okay.
And so we stayed in trailers for a couple of months until we got settled.
And so your mom and dad, did they come over from Japan?
No, my mother was born here. My father was from Hiroshima.
Yeah. So your mom was a citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then you guys went up there, and then do you remember, like, walking into the camp for the first time?
Well, we rode a bus, and I don't know if you saw a movie called Schindler's List.
Yes.
There's one scene in there where the people are silently watching a train as it's coming into the depot.
Yes.
And I suddenly had this deja vu, because I remember it was dusk, and as we were riding into the camp on the buses, you could see the people lined up and silently just watching us.
Wow.
And I don't, it was a different situation in Schindler's List, but then it evoked that kind of memory.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And so then you guys got off the bus and you were walking up to the camp, and then they assigned you guys your housing?
No, they had barracks.
Oh, barracks, okay.
Yeah, and my two brothers and my father went to the camp. My mother was detained at the prison ward at LA County Hospital because she was pregnant. So, and she joined us later with my little brother. He was the fourth son.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was unlike anything that we had experienced before.
Oh, for sure.
Because living in San Fernando Valley, all the Japanese people who lived there were all sent to Manzanar. And so we knew many of the families already, because what we had was in North Hollywood, we had a Japanese language school, and we owned that building. Or we rented it, or I don't know, but we used that building for a Japanese language school. And it was used for social functions for Japanese Americans in San Fernando Valley. Plus, they had one in San Fernando also. So, for the most part, we knew most of the people from our area that went to Manzanar from San Fernando Valley.
So when you guys got there and you guys got your barracks and you guys were all living kind of close together, it sounded like they were like 10 by 10 kind of rooms or something?
No.
Oh.
The rooms were 20 by 25.
Oh, 20 by 25. Okay.
Yeah, but according to the War Relocation Authority, which administered the camps, each person was allowed 100 square feet, 10 by 10.
Got it.
So in one apartment, presumably it was for 4 people, but the camp hadn't been completed when we arrived there, so we had 8 people in this one what they called an apartment in a barrack.
I
and
see.
Each barrack had 4 apartments.
Now, did all the kids get to play, and then they went to school there as well?
Yeah, we went to school. Some of the teachers were really good. There were a few that weren't so good.
Uh-huh.
But for the most part, especially when I was in the 8th and 9th grade, I had good teachers.
Was there like kind of a police department that kind of was there as well to kind of keep things under control inside?
No, they had a military police unit that stayed outside the camp. They patrolled outside the barbed wire.
Okay. Was there any issues like inside the camp with like other Japanese folks arguing? Or
Well, we had a Japanese police department.
Oh, okay.
And that was composed of the internees.
I see.
Yeah, I use the word internees or prisoners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the food like?
Well, at the outset, it was pretty bad.
Was it?
Yeah, because they gave us Army mess kits.
Oh, right.
The aluminum one, 2-piece ones.
Mm-hmm.
We had a hard time because we'd drop our food, and they would give us Army canteen cups.
Right.
Yeah, and if they had hot tea in there, it would leave a blister on your lower lip.
It's funny how we have remember when we're younger. We remember those little things, you know.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. But the food was not very good initially.
Uh-huh.
But the way it worked is each block had its own mess hall, and they had their own cooks. Some mess halls were better than others.
Mm-hmm.
The mess hall for the workers, the Caucasian workers, was really nice because when the camp was closing down, they didn't have enough workers. So as a 13-year-old, I got a job washing pots and pans at the Caucasian mess hall.
Ah.
And their food was considerably better than ours, but they had to pay for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there any problems like with like the military police and the Japanese? Was there like?
Well, they had the shootings in 1942, December of 1942.
In the camp?
In the camp, yeah.
What happened?
Well, what happened was someone, and they think the Caucasian employees were stealing some of our food, and so they were demonstrating against it. But at the same time, there were a group of people who were very pro-Japanese, so they were celebrating December 7th. And the director was new to the camp, Ralph Merritt. He'd just come from the Park Service, and he'd come from Yosemite. So now he's running this prison camp. And I don't know what happened, but I think he panicked and sent the soldiers into the camp, which they weren't supposed to do. The soldiers were supposed to stay outside the camp. And they fired into the crowd.
Oh.
And they killed 2 people. And I remember the Japanese doctor that was there was asked to sign a death certificate indicating that they had been shot in the front instead of in the back. And he refused to do so. Next thing we knew, he was gone.
Oh.
Yeah, but he was a prominent doctor in Southern California. His name was Goto, Dr. Goto. And yeah, I talked to him years later about that because I was volunteering at the museum. He was well on his years. This was probably 1990 maybe. Yeah.
How many people were at Manzanar?
What's that?
How many people were in Manzanar?
Well, the camp was designed for 10,000 people, but ultimately, counting births and people were sent there after the initial camp was opened, probably about 11,000, a little over 11,000.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Corey, who did the movie, Corey Shiosaki, who did the movie, the Manzanar Fishing Club. He talks about in the people sneaking out and going fishing at this camp. And could you tell me a little bit about that?
I didn't know about that until maybe 1944, maybe early 44, because one of the fishermen was stranded in the high country and apparently died of exposure. He'd gone up there to fish with people, but he was also an artist. And so he was going to wander around and do some artwork while the others came back. And I guess there was a blizzard or something that occurred, and maybe he was trapped. And his remains were discovered by some hikers. Was it 1948 or 1949 or somewhere in that time?
Oh, wow.
But his son was a classmate of mine. I don't remember his first name, but the last name was Matsumura. And I remember being with his son when they sent out the search party to try and find him, but they never did.
Wow. So these guys would go up, they would sneak out of the camp, and then they would go up into the high country and catch trout.
Yeah, that was pretty accurate.
Yeah.
That was, but Corey didn't include that particular episode of about Mr. Matsumura dying in his film, and I asked him why. And he kind of didn't think it was important, or I don't know why, but I thought it should have been in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea, these guys would actually found a way to sneak out of the camp, which is which is incredible.
Yeah.
And did they do it at a certain location, like on the, I guess it would be the west side, huh? Because it go towards the mountains, or?
Yeah, I know that Bears Creek came through the camp. And it was on the southwest corner of the camp. It just kind of went diagonally through that corner.
I see. And
then you could get under the barbed wire fence in the creek and go up the creek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we didn't do that as long as the soldiers were there.
Yeah.
And then when the soldiers were pulled out, then we had free access to walk to Shepherd's Creek or George's Creek or Hogback Creek. Yeah.
So would they bring those fish back, of course, or would they eat them up there, or would they bring them back for food, or what did they do with those?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Corey seems to think they brought them back because they had that one picture with the guy holding the golden trout.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And what was it, Phil Feaster, the guy who worked for the Fish and Game back then, he verified that the pictures were golden trout.
Wow, so cool.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. So how did you get into fishing?
Well, when we were in Manzanar, I remember this soldier came by and he handed us a bag, a brown paper bag, and it had these little wooden squares with string wrapped around it with hooks on it.
Oh, cool.
And they were called drop lines.
Yeah.
And Corey puts that in the film, except the pictures of the drop lines are not accurate, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And I don't think we ever caught a fish with that stuff, but it had hooks on the end of the green line. It was just basically string.
Uh-huh.
And it was a wooden frame, and you wrapped the string around the frame, but we never caught anything. The only way we caught it, what we'd do is we'd find them and we'd pile rocks in the stream and create a kind of a pool and catch them with our hands.
Oh, yeah. And would these be in the creek that was going through Manzanar, or did you guys?
Yeah, that was in Bears Creek.
Okay. And,
yeah.
And did they stock that for you guys? Or is there just wild fish in there?
According to the documents that Corey showed me, they yes, they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you got that little hook and line type deal, and so that kind of sparked your interest a little bit in fishing?
Well, sort of. You know, you're a kid.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the things in the Japanese community that we did was we did a lot of ocean fishing.
Okay.
And then because we didn't have any money, we would go surf fishing. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes there was a barge out in Santa Monica Bay. So if you went there and fished at night, it was half the price or thereabouts, I think, of the cost if you fished during the day. So I had an uncle who loved to go fishing, and as a kid he would take me occasionally. So most of that, and then when we came back from the camps, we belonged to the YMCA, and they would take us up to the San Bernardino Mountains, and they would show us how to fish. But it was just something we did. And then when I got out of high school, and that it was 1949 was the first year I went up to the Sierras. A bunch of us guys, we didn't know what we were doing, but we went up there. and we had bait rods, and we went to Crowley Lake, and I went to Hot Creek, and we fished with bait, and we caught these really nice trout. But we caught them with salmon eggs and whatever lures and whatever we used in those days.
And just had a blast, I bet.
Yeah. And that was the first time I'd seen Hot Creek. Then after, as we grew older, we'd actually camp down there in the gorge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there were no restrictions back then. Uh-huh. And stupidly, we drank the water from the stream.
You guys didn't get sick, did you?
No.
Yeah, okay.
But, all those cattle were, they had the two ranches up above because Hot Creek Ranch and the other ranch were actual working ranches. Because the first time I went to Hot Creek Ranch, it was a working ranch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
you guys would camp there. So then what happened? How did you get introduced to fly fishing? Well,
we saw some guys fishing, and I went out and bought this bamboo rod. It was like maybe $2.75. And they were showing us how to use it. And in those days, the lines were made of silk.
Yeah.
And,
awesome.
And you had to dress them each night.
And
you kind of stretch them between two trees and dry them out and dress them with. And
what year do you think that was? You were doing that with the silk lines.
Oh, that had to be the early 50s.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was before I went to the Army, because I went to the Army in 53.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, huh?
Yeah, because I got drafted in 53. And
did you go to the Korean War?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you got those silk lines, and you did that, and then you went to...
Yeah, but by that time I had this fly rod, and I wasn't very good with it.
Uh-huh.
And then when I was in the Army, I met this guy from Pennsylvania. His name was Janachko. I think it was a Polish name or something like that. But anyway, he was from Harrisburg, and he was a fly fisherman.
Uh-huh.
And so we're stationed in Germany, and there's a river there called the Lech, L-A-C-H, but it's a glacier river, so it was milky green.
Uh-huh.
But we were told there were fish in there, and we went there, and luckily we caught a couple of fish. And then by that time I was a sergeant, so I could buy a car. And what John and I decided to do was we would go fish the Pyrenees.
Nice.
And the streams that Ernest Hemingway fished.
Oh.
I'm a big Ernest Hemingway fan. And anyway, we got there, and we as San Fernando Street Spanish, which wasn't very good. They couldn't understand me. And my French was high school French, and so we kind of got by. But we took our army clothes, and we took a pup tent, and we kind of camped out in the Pyrenees. We didn't know what we were doing.
Uh-huh.
But later on, we went to England, and we fished the Itchen. And at that time, you had to wear your uniform or coat and tie when you left base. So when we got to England and we went to the Itchen, the requirement at that time, this was 1954. Was it 55? 54 or 55. And, no, it was 54. And they made us wear a coat and tie on the stream.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we had a coat and tie.
Perfect.
Yeah, but and then back in the 70s, we took a trip around the country with my kids pulling a trailer, and I went to see my friend John, and I was corresponding with a guy in Williamsport. What's his name? Filson. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But I've been corresponding with him. He's the one that explained how to build leaders to me.
Oh, okay.
And because I would go down to a Cliff Wyatt's shop in Santa Monica, and he would show me his leader.
Uh-huh.
But then I looked at all the formulas, and back at that time, I read all the fly fishing books that were in the LA City Library or County Library. And you could buy a postcard, and you could send it in, and they would deliver that book to your library.
Uh-huh.
And they only had 7 books on fly fishing, which I'm just astounded at how many books are out there, because mostly they're a rehash of stuff that people wrote about a long time ago.
Sure.
Yeah, and they've made the sport too complicated. It used to be simple.
Yeah.
But that was always my thought.
So you started looking at his formulas, his leader formulas, and then did you start developing your own formula for leader construction?
Yeah, that was by accident.
Uh-huh.
Because I was talking to, I can't remember the guy's name in Williamsport. Anyway, he convinced me that he had a kit that was made by Mason that he sold. And he said, buy the kit. But before he had the kit, he had hard nylon that he sold in 44-inch pieces, and he coiled them. And then what he did is he dyed them. He made them he told me camouflage. I didn't know any better. Anyway, he would put them on a stick, and then he'd have these coils that are about 4 inches in diameter with a whole bunch of them in there. And then he'd dip it in one color and rotate it and dip it in another color. It was green, brown, and I think blue or some color like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And since they were 44 inches, and I was building those leaders, that's why the sections came to about 18 inches.
Uh-huh.
And so initially on the taper down, I used 9/8/7, and I did it. The 9 was 9 inches, 8 was 8 inches, 7 was 7 inches. But I changed that later on. And but I learned about the long leader from Cliff Wyatt, and he was one of these crusty old guys, smoked cigarettes, fingers were just brown with nicotine, and he didn't bathe a lot because he lived in his shop, and I don't think there was a shower in his shop. But I don't quite remember.
That's awesome.
But it was this, college student. I'm an Asian guy. Go in the store, and everyone in there's white. And I'm asking him questions, and he sits me down at this table, and it's just an old kitchen table with a vinyl covering on it, and it seems there's not a square inch around the edge of it that doesn't have a cigarette burn on it. and he shows me stuff. For instance, one of the things he told me, he says, you got to use black thread for dry flies and white thread for wet flies. I said, how come? He says, so you can tell the difference. I didn't know any difference. Anyway, Cliff was the master, right?
Yeah. You listened.
Yeah. Anyway, he was good to me. He would take time to explain things on how to tie flies.
Nice.
He had his own brand of rods, and I bought a 6-weight that was 7 feet long, and I used it for a long time. It cast really well.
Uh-huh.
And I used it with 6-weight double taper. And for dry fly fishing, that's the only line I use now.
Uh-huh.
I use a Cortland 444 double taper because it's so supple.
Yeah.
And
so where was this guy located? This buddy?
He was on Broadway near 20th.
Okay.
In Santa Monica.
Okay.
It was called the Wilderness Fly Shop.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, he was one of the founders of the Wilderness Fly Fishing Club, which is the Santa Monica Fly Fishing Club.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's the Wilderness.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good history there. Had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there weren't a lot of fly shops around. It was Ned Gray up in Montrose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I knew Ned really well, and he was always good to me. But that was later on. I got to meet Ned. Well, let's see. We moved to San Fernando Valley in '75, and that's when I got to meet Ned, because I joined this Sierra Pacific Fly Fishing Club here in the valley.
Yeah.
And so I would spend time with him, and then what was that Orange County fly shop's name? The big one.
The Bob Marriott's one?
Yeah, Bob Marriott. But he had a satellite store in Burbank.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and one of the guys in our club was a businessman, and he wanted to learn how to fly fish, and I would take him fly fishing, show him how, and he would. I remember one instance. I always used just an old fly tying vise.
Uh-huh.
And it was a bee vise. And I remember demonstrating fly tying at his shop.
Oh, cool.
And he says, Moss, I can't make any money selling those Thompson bee vices. Why don't you use one of these more expensive vices? I said, yeah, let me use the Spartan. Okay, so I started, next time I used the Spartan, he sold 4 or 5 of them.
Sure.
He says, "You want to buy the Spartan?" I said, "No, $60. I can't afford that." He says, "No, it's used. I'll sell it to you half price."
Awesome.
So I've been using that ever since, and I had 2 jaws on it, one for really small flies.
Uh-huh.
And eventually I used it so much it actually bent out, and I had to have a machinist friend of mine grind it down so it would work again.
Funny.
So the jaws are a lot shorter than the ones for the mini flies. But I still use that. It's my favorite vise.
So at the Bart Hall show, you were. I think you walked into my booth or something, and you were talking to me. Last month, and so we're getting to talking and stuff. And you said you were going down to the Manzanar booth, and I started chatting with you. And then you're, my name's Moss, and I go, my name's Guy, and he's all, oh, you spoke at my club one time, and I go, oh, I know who you are. I've heard of you. And so it was kind of funny, we both had heard of each other or seen each other before, but had never really been introduced, and and so I have for years have of course heard of you and your long leaders that you use on Hot Creek, and I'd like to talk to you about those and how you got to using that at Hot Creek. And Hot Creek has become like one of your favorite places. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And would you mind like talking a little bit about your leader construction, if you don't mind, and also like some of the flies that you tie for Hot Creek and how you fish that leader?
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. So how did you come up with this long leader?
Well, I used Cliff's formula, which was a formula that some famous fly fisherman developed.
Uh-huh.
But he just made it longer. And he had pieces that were, first piece was maybe 36, 24, and it was graduated down. And he graduated it down to maybe, maybe 7 thousandths or maybe 8 thousandths. Anyway, he had a pretty heavy tippet on there. And so I looked up all the formulas that were around at that time,
mm-hmm.
and I came across maybe 5 or 6 of them. I tried all of them. They didn't work too well. And then, as I say, I got these coils and started building them with 18 inches. And I nail knotted them,
Uh-huh.
and then I coated the nail knot with Pliabond, so it would slide easily through the guides.
Uh-huh.
And I found that would really lay out there, because in those days I could only afford the one line.
Yeah.
And it would cast really well, but I've over the years this is how I do it. When I used to go to the fly shows, I'd take my reel with me, and I'd try out all the rods from 6-weight on down that a manufacturer had.
Uh-huh.
And if I liked them, I would usually buy the blank and build the rod.
Okay.
Yeah, and so over the years, I've gone through maybe a dozen rods that were satisfactory to my system.
Uh-huh.
And one of the best rods ever made for the way that I cast is a Thomas & Thomas 4.5 weight special dry fly. There were only 20 of them made.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There were 50 of them made, because I listened to Lynn Codella, who designed it, and I have friends who own 2 or 3 of those things.
Really?
Yeah, and they're extremely valuable because they're parabolics. And but anyway, I've gone through a lot of them. And then I found the TFO rod, the really cheap rod. It was something like $90, and I thought, oh hell, this one really works well.
Awesome, perfect.
Anyway, what occurred was I went to a show, and the guy was there, and I said, and I was complaining, how come you discontinued this? He said, we can't make any money on it. and I said, well, you got a 4-weight rod? And I said, no, we only got this BVK 3-weight. And I said, do you mind if I try? Sure, go ahead. And I put my reel on that thing, and it cast all leader, and it cast 40 feet of line. That was all I had on my reel because I cut the lines in half. And it was just, without exception, the optimal rod for the way I fish. Just absolutely a dream rod. And people would ask me, how can you put a 6-weight line on a 3-weight rod? I said, you just screw it in. That's how you put it on. But the only drawback is when you get a big fish.
Right.
You know, I love fishing Henry's Fork, and you know how the grass is there.
Yeah.
And it was hard to pull those fish out of the grass. But God, that thing worked well there.
So your leader was, how long was the leader after it was all complete?
Well, normally it was designed to be 21 feet.
Okay.
Cliff's was always 23 feet.
Okay.
And the way I do it is I always know how long it is, simply because I pull it through my rod and bring it around the reel and bring it to the midpoint, and that's 20 feet.
Okay.
And then I tighten it up to take the kinks out and let it sit a while. And then I taper it down to 5/1000. But I use limp nylon for the tippet.
And so how would you cast that?
Carefully.
Yeah. Like, would you, you cast up?
The way you do it, the way I do it, it's I cast differently than everyone else. For instance, when I hold the rod, I don't take my elbow away from my body, because I had a bad shoulder for years until I had the surgery done about 15 years ago. But I would have to keep my elbow in. So that meant that I had the perfect casting motion because I didn't break my wrist. And the way it would work is I would, after I made a cast and the line would be out there tightly, I would put the rod tip right down on the water, and I would pick it up at a 45-degree angle to my right. Yeah. And then I would start and when I'm picking it up, I have both my hands together on the rod. My right hand's holding it, my left hand's next to it, holding the line. Okay. And then as I pick it up and I start the forward cast and I feel the load, then with my left hand, I'll pull it down about 18 inches or 2 feet. And what that'll do is accelerate the line so it goes all the way across the stream. Okay. And I do it at a 45-degree angle. So there's a big belly upstream as a line lands on the water. And the moment it hits the water, I have the rod tip on the water, and I give it a big upstream bend. Okay. And then as the fly will then precede the leader, and I give it a series of mends. And then as it gets farther down, and I feed mend so that I get, without any problem, 20 feet of drag-free drift. Yeah. And I try to explain that to people, and they say, well, you can't do that because a 3-weight rod should use a 3. I said, whoever told you that nonsense? and people get so enamored because The one thing that Sage does not do is they do not make a slow action rod. And people swear by Sage. Well, if you have a fast section rod and you cast, you get a straight line out there and you get instant drag. And people don't understand that. And so I like a real soft tip, but I also like a rod that has backbone in the bottom section, and that's what the BDK rods have. That's why they cast so nicely.
Are they still making those?
Yeah, what, $300 or something?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So you do a downstream presentation, so the fly is presented.
No, I fish cross stream.
Cross stream, and then you
cross stream.
Yeah, and then you drift the fly downstream by.
Yeah, the fly precedes the leader.
Okay.
Because the conventional wisdom is to cast upstream.
Right.
And so I talk to guys who do that. I said, "Oh man, we missed it.
Yeah.
We missed that fish." And then I'll say, "How many times have you hooked a fish on the top of the head?" They said, "Oh, frequently." I said, "Do you know what happens?" They said, "No." He says, "When you cast upstream and the fish comes up to take that fly, it hits your tippet. That's why when you get it, it's always in the top half of the mouth."
Right.
Where it's on the top of the head,
Uh-huh.
or it hits the fly and you miss it. You can feel that little tick.
Yeah.
And that tick was, it skimmed on the top of the head.
Yeah.
I said, no one ever explained that to me before.
Yeah.
I said, well, you're talking to a guy who had to learn all of this on his own. There weren't people to teach me. There weren't classes. There weren't all these books. And, all you have to ask is ask me, and I'll tell you how I fish.
Yeah.
Because I used to give talks, and the talks were how Moss fishes Hot Creek.
Uh-huh.
It's not how you should fish Hot Creek. And I would show them where to put the fly and how to put it there and how to get a fish. For instance,
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, there's so much grass." I said, "Grass is your greatest friend there." He said, "Why?" He says, "It puts the amateurs off the stream." And they don't know where to catch the fish. So I would show people, where the tailing grass was, and there was a 3-inch gap.
Yeah.
And I said, drop the fly 3 feet above that gap and let it float down that open space. And when that fish comes up, lift your rod horizontally. Don't pull it back. Just lift it straight horizontally.
Yeah.
And it'll set the hook. And the moment you hook them, walk them downstream. So they take them out of the grass.
Nice.
And only about 4 people I've taught actually do that. and there's some really nice fish under that grass.
There is, huh?
But what's happened, the grass has declined dramatically over the years. And probably that's because the deer feed on the stream now. One time the deer never came in the stream.
Have you seen that stream change dramatically?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the vegetation along the banks has changed.
Uh-huh.
The silting that has occurred.
Uh-huh.
It's you could say if you fished it in the 70s and 80s in the public section,
Yeah.
and you were there the third week in June where the PMDs came off, and they were a 6-millimeter body. You could, because the fish at that time would come up from Crowley through the grass.
Uh-huh.
But what's occurred is that the grass has gotten thick, so the fish don't spawn in the stream as they once did, because you could go to that area just below the hatchery in the fall, and you could count 100 fish in that area spawning.
Okay.
Now you don't see maybe 1 or 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, because what the hatchery did is they put that new pond in and silted that whole area up.
Oh.
Yeah, and when they did the Casa Diablo hot spring penetration, it killed off all the stoneflies in the stream. There were 2 stoneflies that appeared there. the yellow one.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then one that was kind of a mossy green. They disappeared.
Interesting.
And so you see almost the scud are nearly all gone in Hot Creek. I don't see any scud there. They might be there, but I don't harvest the grass anymore.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But there was millions of scud in there.
Wow.
And you could use a scud pattern. And it was, but basically, when I teach fly tying, so you only need to know a couple of things. You need to know, first of all, you need to know two things. One is presentation, and two is pattern. That's all you need to know. And they said, well, okay. And the hardest one to learn is presentation.
Sure.
That's the hardest. Pattern, you can figure that out. And then when I teach fly tying, on tying flies, I have only 5 requisites. One, it's got to catch fish. Two, it's got to be easy to tie. 3, it has to be durable. 3, it has to be 4, it has to be inexpensive. And 5, it has to be visible.
Mm.
And so when I do patterns, I simply tell people that all you need to know is body size and body color. That's all you need to know. You just tie something with body size and body color. It doesn't make any difference with silhouette, because if you tie it right, it'll float in the meniscus at an angle. And they said, well, how do you get it to float at an angle? As well, you tie elk hair on there. You tie enough elk hair so you can see the fly. The elk hair is there to float the fly, but it's also there for visibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then the emerger is that fly that I use, and the other one is the Hot Creek Killer, which is basically one of the first flies that I tied. And I've been using that since the 50s, and it's worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would you tie, because I know that Hot Creek has pretty small flies as well, right? So would you tie like really tiny flies?
Oh, well, what I do is if you can't buy really small hooks, what you do is you tie the body, a short body on the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Say it's a size 20 hook, and you want a 3 millimeter body. All you tie is a body 3 millimeters long.
Right.
And the analogy that I use is 4 guys are sitting in the bar, and they're drinking. And there's some well enhanced woman walks in, and everyone looks at her. And I come in 10 minutes later, and I say, "Hey, fellas, what color were her shoes?"
Good one, yeah.
Okay, because I believe the fish focuses on the body and the body color, and I've done demonstrations to show that.
Uh-huh.
For instance, I'll take my Hot Creek emerger and I'll tie it in a 5 millimeter body, and I'll have it in 5 colors, and I'll take it down to the stream, and I'll have these people with me, and I know there are 3 fish in that one run.
Yeah.
And I'll cast each of them. I'll have a PMD, maybe I'll have anyway, an olive body,
yeah,
maybe a tan body, maybe a gray body, and a peacock body.
Uh-huh.
And I'll float them over the fish, and I'll give each of them at least 5 casts, maybe 4 casts.
Uh-huh.
But on one of those flies, what'll happen is those fish that are lying on the bottom, one of them will come up about 3 inches, maybe 4 inches, and then come down. And what that tells me is what we have is a right body color.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually peacock curl. And so then I explained to them, so we got the right body color, but we got the wrong body size. Mm-hmm. So I'll go down to maybe a 3 millimeter body, and I'll just put that one on the line, and I'll catch all three of those fish.
Uh-huh.
And what I have against most fly tyers is they make their flies too complicated, and most of them don't understand the half itch, so they don't make them durable.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my shtick anyway.
That's good. That's definitely a good philosophy.
Yeah, because people will ask me, how many fish have you caught on one fly before it came apart? And I said, I had a killer, and I caught 24 fish with it before it came apart. So how can you catch 24 fish? I said, well, after each third fish I catch, I retie the fly. But after each fish I catch, I feel for knots in the leader and the tippet. And so durability, what does a fly cost me? 5 cents a tie?
Yeah.
Because I still have hooks I paid $4.100 for.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they got $1 worth of material. They've got these super peacock curls, real long ones that are really fine, and they make a really thin body. And I was fishing with Engels. What's Engels' first name?
Oh, Ed.
Ed. Yeah, I was fishing with Ed
Uh-huh.
on the South Platte.
Uh-huh.
And a spinnerfall came on, and I picked one up, and it had a 6mm body, so I put a 6mm Hot Creek emerger on there. And Ed said, I can't believe the guy caught that many fish. And Ed's a master.
Yeah.
The guy, and he's one of the most basic guys I've ever met. If he were close by, I'd fish with him all the time.
Uh-huh.
Because there's nothing phony about him.
Yeah.
A lot of these famous fly fishermen are big I ams.
Uh-huh.
Not Ed.
Uh-huh.
And he's willing to share. And
I love it.
yeah, I even put my fly in his last book.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool.
But the leader, they still sell the Mason freshwater kits, and you can probably go online and buy them. They're probably about $40 now. I don't know how much they cost because I haven't bought one in a long time. But for tippet material, a lot of people use a lot of things. They use fluorocarbon and all that, but not me. I use P-line. I just buy it in bulk and put it on the little spools. And I have stuff that I bought in 2005 that's still good.
Awesome. I got one last question for you, and I wanted to ask you your favorite stream to fish and your favorite fly.
Well, there are a number of streams that are my favorite.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
that's a hard one.
Hot Creek is kind of the place I fished for so long.
Sure.
And the fly that works the best most of the time is my Peacock Hot Creek emerger. That probably works better than any other fly on that stream. Okay. It's probably caught more fish on that stream than any other fly I use.
Okay.
And the second would probably be the Peacock Killer.
And that's your own fly.
Yeah, that's a fly that I tie. It's called a Killer.
I love it. If somebody was to want to learn how to tie these, could they find that somewhere?
I think we have those on our Sierra Pacific has them on their web page, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but I know they taped all of those at one time.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, Michael Paratus would probably know about that. Do you know Michael Paratus?
Yeah. He I think he taped my presentation at Sierra Pacific. I think he does a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, he knows all about that stuff.
Okay.
And probably, I love the frying pan.
Oh, yeah, huh?
And I love Henry's Fork.
Uh-huh.
And I love the South Platte. If I had 4 streams to fish, and it's kind of, if those places were closer, I'd fish them more. But
sure.
But what I would do is I'd just go there for 2 weeks and fish the same stream.
Yeah.
And that's I do that every year. I go one place for 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But having been a teacher, I always had time off in the summer.
Right.
Yeah. So it's the best job for being a fly fisherman.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Moss, that was a great podcast, buddy. Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know how you're going to edit it or what you're going to do.
But, no editing. It was all perfect. I mean, I'm still, live right now. So, I really appreciate your knowledge and your history and everything that you talked to me about. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate it.
Well, good. We did an hour.
Yeah, it's about perfect.
Okay.
All right.
We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Moss. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
With everything going on in the world today, right now could be the best time ever to diversify your retirement savings with precious metals like gold and silver. I just bought some precious metals myself, and I got them from the top-rated company, Goldco. They couldn't have made the process easier, and their customer service was impeccable. Goldco has helped thousands of people just like you and me place over $2.5 billion in gold and silver. They're rated A+ by Better Business Bureau. They've earned over 5,000 5-star reviews. They're a 7-time Incorporated 5,000 winner. And that's just mentioning a few of their accomplishments. There's plenty more. Right now, for my listeners, they're offering up to $10,000 in bonus silver. You heard that right, up to $10,000 in bonus silver, but only while supplies last. Go to goldco.com/guy to learn more. That's goldco.com/guy. Diversify your savings with gold and silver today at goldco.com/guy.
It's a Guy Jeans podcast.